Are you already registered with Wikisana?
A warm welcome to all our viewers, to our series Natural Medicine Today. Today we're looking at the liver of a woman. How do they differ? What is special about them? What should you look out for? Especially in terms of support, examinations, and the quality of detoxification. And I'm discussing all of this today with our general practitioner, Alexandra Kotthaus. Stay tuned. Hello dear Alexandra, nice to have you back.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm always happy when you talk about everyday life in your practice. You are the head doctor at the BioMed Sonnenberg Center. Yes, that's right. But the liver really is an important factor. I think that's a burden in general, especially in society.
Yes, absolutely. Well, my observation right now is that in the last year, I've always had women coming to me with the wish, I would like to lose weight, or that something is wrong with my metabolism. I no longer react the same way as before on some things. And yet they are actually already living quite well and healthily, and are even exercising. And somehow they don't get off the ground, or they stagnate, or get more and more tired, for example. And then I often experience what they tell me, that they use methods that usually work better with men than with women.
Wie soll ich das sagen? Methoden anwenden, die meistens bei Männern besser funktionieren als bei Frauen.
Something like intermittent fasting, for example. That works really well for men. And some women say that nothing happens.
Exactly. I also had some who have said, yes, I did that. The weight plummeted for the first 4 weeks and then it stagnated. But I also have women where you can say that their liver is already in such a bad state. That didn't work at all from the start. Who then say that I didn't even have the great effect that the others are reporting. Or, of course, low carb, high protein diets are all the rage at the moment, and that's actually not so good for a woman and her liver. Yes, even women with, I say, of course, it's individually different, but from the mid-30s also towards the menopause, even after the menopause actually, to deprive them of carbohydrates, where there is usually hyperestrogenization, that's just exactly the wrong way around.
What do carbohydrates do in relation to estrogen?
Reversed. The estrogen can cause food cravings. And if you don't satisfy it, but somehow endure it, it can actually lead to even more stress in the body. Just like intermittent fasting. There are many studies and investigations where you can say that this is promising, but there are not actually any reliable long-term data, but the mechanism behind it has been clarified. In other words, I explain this to my patients and say that skipping a meal increases adrenaline, noradrenaline, dopamine and cortisol. And then I ask my patients, who are usually a medical layperson, when I tell them, so, now you have a repeatedly provoked increase in adrenaline and cortisol levels. What do you think, is that good? What do you think?
Well, muscle breakdown and fat storage. Exactly what you don't want, right?
No. So first of all, if I keep pushing my adrenaline level, which is usually already high if we're not heading towards burnout, then I'm getting the last out of my adrenal glands. Of course, as long as the system is still working, adrenaline already increases fat loss. Cortisol can also have a certain anti-inflammatory effect. We all know that too much cortisol also has various side effects, and dopamine simply puts you in a good mood. Yes, it's the reward hormone. And that means I can have effects, depending on what my starting position is, how I otherwise live, how I deal with my stress, what I eat. I may be able to keep it up for quite a while, maybe even for 2 years. The other thing that is not taken into account in most of these studies is the effect of what people leave out, which is usually breakfast, which often consists of gluten, or wheat, or not even whole wheat, cheese, sausage, where other things are involved, sugars and nitrite curing salt, or something like that, or sugar like jam. Of course, if I leave it out, I already have an improvement. And of course it also pinches less in my stomach if I give it less or nothing at all. So it's a bit of a summation effect. On the other hand, there are also studies that say, hey, if I swap this for a plant-based diet, I can achieve the same effects without the side effects.
How can I regenerate a liver like that? Because I think this is a case where many women come and say that they can't do anything anymore.
Yes, it depends on where someone is at the moment and how stressed the liver is or how well the adrenal glands are still functioning. There are people, women, who really do make considerable progress after 4 to 6 weeks by changing their diet and taking certain supplements. And there are women who need a little longer. So I always check after about 4 to 6 weeks. How did someone react to what I do first? This means that I don't usually reach directly into my deep bag of tricks or into my technical equipment options, which thank God are at my disposal. But I first see how someone reacts to what I prescribe at the beginning. And then I can usually get a pretty good idea of where someone currently stands. And then I'll have the lab results at the next appointment so that I can assess whether something is still missing, whether I need to refuel, whether I need to support the liver even more intensively with things to take, herbal things, for example. But in more stubborn cases, I would then also resort to local hypothermia or even whole body hypothermia.
What exactly does hypothermia do?
Hypothermia makes so every extra degree doubles the metabolic output.
Also sustainable.
Of body temperature. Not entirely sustainable. That goes down again, of course, when the temperature drops. But I've got something like this going for the time being. I also have during, regardless of whether I have local or whole body hypothermia, of course, I have a few more effects. Now if I really get someone into the whole body hypothermia, really in the fever range. But I also sometimes see that when someone is so blocked, they don't even reach fever pitch in the first session. But I still have increased blood flow, which means I have more oxygen that is transported to the cells and more waste products that can be transported away from the cells. And what we do is whole body hypothermia via infrared A radiation. And that in itself also has various healing effects. It can also be used to balance the hormone balance.
I was just about to ask that. That's also a key. I also read somewhere about hypothermia, that you can really get this balance into the hormones. What exactly happens there?
Well, the infrared A, but also certain other infrared or red light frequencies can, on the one hand, when it hits the skin, the red light doesn't go in really deep, the infrared goes a bit deeper.
Zum einen, wenn das auf die Haut auftritt, dann das Rotlicht geht nicht wirklich tief rein, das Infrarot geht ein Stück tiefer.
What we have is water-filtered infrared. A few more frequencies are filtered out, so to speak. We have an even deeper penetration depth, so that the light reaches the capillary bed and heats up the blood. But I also have a direct effect on cytochrome C, for example, via the light frequencies. Cytochrome C is part of the mitochondria in the respiratory chain, which means that the respiratory chain and mitochondrial function improve. But also when I have better organ function, as with the liver. The liver produces the precursors of the hormones and subsequently also breaks down the hormones. If I improve my metabolism, I also have a better hormonal balance. It can also be said that the red light influences What I can think of right now is 20 different factors. Factors can be, for example, hormones, can be growth hormones, can be a BDNF, a hormone that helps to regenerate the central nervous system.
Das zentrale Nervensystem hilft, zu regenerieren.
So there are so many things that come together. Ultimately, it is also the sweating itself. Unfortunately, there are very few tests, and I have a hard time finding a laboratory that is willing to test sweat or sweat with blood. The information that is available says, hey, we have many times more toxins in our sweat than I can measure or get out via the blood or urine. So that's simply several birds with one stone.
Great, yes.
We women, quite a few women, take the pill at a younger age, hormonal contraception, or a few hormones later on during the menopause, and that doesn't come out on its own. But it is always the liver that has to break it down, which then has its problems with it. But we also have other hormones, xenestrogen, so toxins such as glyphosate or pesticides, phthalates, BPA, plasticizers in plastic, which also disrupt our hormone system, mislead it and thus also our liver.
Now we keep hearing that bitter substances are so important. What role do they play? Are you integrating them too?
Well, not necessarily. Yes and no. Not necessarily for everyone. If someone comes in and is really blocked, then I even go so far as to not even give them drops that contain alcohol. Many have alcohol, and some don't even have that little of it. In other words, I'm actually a bit gentler, even often, and recommend lots of raw leafy greens. If someone now says, I can't tolerate that, then well, as a smoothie or freshly squeezed juice and mixed with fruit. For a sick liver, a green juice with fruit, or a green smoothie with fruit. So I make a huge distinction between carbohydrates. But I don't regulate the amount of carbohydrates. And as soon as you mix it with vegetables or greens, the blood sugar level drops again enormously. But it doesn't go up like that anyway, from fruit. Unfortunately, there are these studies that have been done with fructose. And now a lot of people think fruit is bad. An average apple has 2 grams of fructose. For one thing, it's not that much, and it doesn't get into your blood. And above all, it is not metabolized in an insulin-dependent manner. And insulin is precisely what holds back the fat in the fat cells. And not the fructose, the artificial fructose that was used in the studies. This is artificial fructose from corn syrup, which was probably genetically modified, and it is lumped together with fruit. So that's where I get really upset now. And that's so different from having unpackaged natural fructose in a food that has more vitamin C, more polyphenols, antioxidants, and even often fiber than even vegetables.
Yes, it's tough with the studies, always how you can spin it that way.
Yes, exactly.
If I, as a woman, really want to have this examined to see how my liver is doing, what do I have to tell my GP? Nowadays we have to say what we want ourselves.
The liver values themselves, GOT, GPT, or depending on the laboratory and country it is called AST, ALT. These are only of limited value. I've always had patients go to another doctor for something else, and they say it's total nonsense. Their liver values are great. They have nothing wrong with their liver and they certainly don't need to detoxify it. Yes, well, then you should have paid attention during your studies. Well, at least I learned in my studies that the liver values only go up when 2/3 of the liver function is damaged. The same applies to the kidneys. So liver values that are high are definitely pathological, but liver values that are low do not rule out that the liver is well. And they indicate liver cell damage and not liver function. This is something that is often forgotten.
But how can I check the liver function then?
For example, I look at the cholesterol levels or the triglycerides. You have to look at it a little bit. They are partly food dependent, partly a little less food dependent. In other words, dependent on what you ate in the day or two before. But the cholesterol level is already rising. So I have a lot of people who don't actually eat badly and have high cholesterol levels. But that's the first sign. The liver is going to its knees. It's having a hard time metabolizing. I also look at the bilirubin value, for example. I always look at the pancreas values, which is not necessarily standard, but they are important.
That's the HB1C, isn't it?
No, pancreas values, lipase, amylase. This is not really noticeable very often, but often enough, and so inexpensive in terms of value that we have integrated it into our routine laboratory.
Okay.
And it's not unusual to have values that are too high. This means that the pancreas is stressed. I mean, it also plays an important role in the digestive process. The bilirubin level is not necessarily in a standard laboratory either, not even both bile duct values. Sometimes the gamma GT, which many people are still familiar with, is included, but not the alkaline phosphatase.
For that you really have to be an expert. I'm not going to do that quickly myself.
No. Because that's still the case. I still don't have the function, but the function I hear from the anamnesis, what I've already done. Or sweating doesn't work and the weight just won't go down. Or I'm constantly sweating, or my hands are cold, or my feet are always hot. I wake up at night. These are signs. But also during the physical examination. There are liver signs on the face. In Chinese medicine, the eyes belong to the liver. There are signs on the stomach. There are not even that few people who have spider veins above their liver. For example, I look at the condition of the abdominal fat. Cellulite is simply a liver overload. Varicose veins. In other words, the liver values. The lab, I actually only do that now. I always say, for forensic reasons. If you are a good listener, ask the right questions and investigate, then you will have many, many answers.
You also spoke earlier about dietary supplements. What else would be important from your point of view, especially to support the liver or to lose weight?
Well, zinc. Our soils have become quite poor in zinc. There is much less zinc in food than there used to be, and it depends. So I give a little more zinc to one person and a little less zinc to another. Which and how much I actually do individually. Of course, there are also a few antioxidants, and we have a specialty in the house. Let's say there are many birds with one stone. The doctor, Rao's Neurosana, where I also include the intestine, where I include plant extracts, where turmeric is also included, which also supports the liver from a metabolic point of view. The most common mineral deficiencies, B vitamins, but also only in certain forms for certain types or metabolic types, maybe again other things on top. B12 sometimes has to be added separately, because it is not found in almost anything. So there are some that are properly dosed, but most of them don't have enough to substitute a real deficiency.
Do you combine the B12 with folic acid? I've heard that again and again.
Well, I rarely give B12 on its own, because I tend to add B12. By that I mean that they get a B complex anyway, and the one we use also contains the readily available folic acid.
Okay. Now, holistically. You've just said something about the eyes with Chinese medicine. The liver also has an emotional component. Anger, right?
Yes, I know.
I don't know. Because if you look at it holistically, we connect it to the liver when someone is angry, right?
I would say, after many years of biomedicine and psychiatry, it always ruffles my feathers a little when women are pushed onto the psycho track too quickly. So women with the metabolic problems, now I really have to think about whether I couldn't have managed someone. General practitioners, or conventional doctors, are often relatively quick to blame it on psychosis if they can't make any progress. In naturopathy, or alternative medicine, the boundary is a little wider. But the tendencies are there too. But I can't say that it's the liver blockage, that's what I've seen. I do see illnesses, or let's say mental conflicts, as potential obstacles to healing. But these are often other illnesses. That's how I would put it. And I don't think it's wrong to see if there's anything there. But when it comes to the liver issue, it is not the priority. So after nutrition, after supplements, after maybe Iratherm. It's more like when the liver is working again, you can sometimes digest feelings better. And it's actually much easier. I first get the body in order, or at least back on track, and then things often show up that might want or need to be looked at. But when I feel fitter again, I can fall back on a completely different toolbox, including a mental one.
Yes.
And what I've experienced recently, or in the last year, there were women who were already very conscious, or in some cases therapists themselves. That was simply not the problem, but really the blocked liver. And what's going on in the world today is primarily a frontal attack on women. Everyone knows that men tolerate alcohol better, women livers a little less. And women can also tolerate less of this toxic waste that surrounds us. Women's livers go to their knees faster, and women don't always have to be pushed onto the psycho track for this. But we are fundamentally worse detoxifiers than men. And that is the main problem, that we are poisoned, that we have xenoestrogens. That there may be chronic viral illnesses on top of that, and not that we have mental conflicts. Women usually talk about it more quickly, and are more likely to be pushed into it. I don't want to say it can't be very important to look there in individual cases. But basically, just living here in the middle of the industrialized world is enormously stressful for the liver, and for women even more so than for men. And then they get sick more quickly, and they get tired more quickly, and things like that. They are like the canaries in the coal mine. They are simply the ones who fall over first.
Okay. Nice closing words. Yes, but thanks for the overview. Definitely super interesting. Above all, we have now included a lot of aspects so that women can have a good look. What appeals to me? Where can I turn a screw? Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
See you again soon, I hope.
Gladly again.
Dear viewers, I hope you were able to take something away with you. Super exciting, how you can support the liver and in what ways. And thank you for watching. See you soon.